which is the first subsection of that section, which is that on kindness and obedience to parents. So we'll just do a quick review of that. Before we do that, I'll say that this section, what it does is it clarifies that part of having good character is how you treat others. That's a big part of having good character. How you treat others, knowing the rights and status of each individual person, and dealing with them in accordance with those rights and that status. So a husband dealing with his wife according to her rights and status, a wife dealing with her husband according to her rights and status, the elderly dealing with children according to their rights and status, children dealing with their elders according to their rights and status, one Muslim to another Muslim, etc. And these dealings are a critical aspect, an essential aspect of good character. We can't claim to have good character if we don't know how to work, to interact with people, how to treat others. And so they embark on this part of the book, which is a very important part of it, and they begin with the rights of parents and how parents are supposed to be treated. And they do this because there is no right after the right of Allah, which is greater than the right of parents. So they begin with the creation, created beings, and how they're supposed to be treated. And they begin with the created being which has the most right, who's most entitled to what? Good treatment, and that's what? The parents. So they talk about this kindness and obedience to parents, and they mention some of those ayat and hadith which stress and emphasize that parents are supposed to be treated with respect, they're supposed to be revered, honored, obeyed, etc. And for example, they mention the ayah, which is called ayat al-Huquq al-Ashara, the verse of 10 rights, and it begins with Allah saying, وَعْبُدُ اللَّهَ وَلَا تُشْرِكُوا بِهِ شَيْئًا وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. Worship Allah alone, and do not associate any partners with Him, and be good, treat your parents kindly, be dutiful to your parents, etc. And they mention the other ayah, which is similar to that in Surah Al-Isra, which says the same thing. Both of them implying, or says something similar, I should say, both of them implying that after the right of Allah, there's no right more worthy of being fulfilled than the right of parents. We also mentioned the hadith where the Prophet was asked, what deed is the most beloved to Allah? Okay, and we're always looking to find that deed which Allah loves the most so that we can do it and get the ajr of Allah, get Allah's pleasure, etc., get that thawab. And the Prophet said, as-salatu ala waqtiha. He said, prayer in its prescribed time. Then it was said to him, thumma ay, then what deed? What deed follows it in terms of what? Being the second most beloved to Allah. He said, honoring your parents. Birrul walidain, honoring your parents. So that lets us know that this is something stressed and emphasized in the deen, to the point that no deed is more beloved to Allah than this deed except what? Praying at the prescribed time. Then we mentioned some of the reasons why Islam stressed and emphasized the rights of parents. So we said, for example, that they are the reason after Allah for our existence. That's one reason why we're supposed to honor them, because if it weren't for them, after Allah, we wouldn't be here. Another reason is that they raised and cared for us when we couldn't do that for ourselves. Okay, so they cleaned us when we couldn't clean ourselves, fed us when we couldn't feed ourselves, clothed us and sheltered us when we couldn't do those things for ourselves. Another thing is that in most cases, parents suffer in some way or another so that we can be comfortable. That they sacrifice their own comfort for our comfort. Also, obviously, the great sacrifice the mother made in terms of what? Carrying the child. Okay, this is a huge sacrifice and burden that the mother happily bears. Okay? Happily bears this burden. Women know what they're going to go through when they get pregnant. But most women, what? They're excited, eager to what? To bear children. They look forward to it. They want to do this. And so they happily bear this what? The burden of what? 9 months of pain, of sleepless nights, of contractions, etc. They bear that. So because of that, they're entitled to what? Some respect, some obedience, etc. And conversely, fathers, they don't carry it, but they do what? They go out and work hard. Sometimes they do break back in work to provide food, clothing, and shelter for the child. So again, they're also doing what? Making their contribution to the child. And so they're entitled to what? Respect, etc. So we mentioned some of those reasons why Islam stresses and emphasizes the rights of parents. Then after that, we mentioned that the right of the parents to be obeyed and to be respected and honored and revered is not conditional. So regardless of the age of the child, it's not something that basically, okay, their right to that expires when I become what? An adult. Or expires when I have my own family. No, that our parents, well into our 50s, 60s, and 70s, if they're still alive, they're entitled to what? Our utmost respect. That we have to humble ourselves in front of our parents. And if they ask us to do something, we do it humbly. I go home and my mom says, take out the trash. I can't say, I'm a grown man with my own children. I want to take out the trash. No, I have to take out the trash. She says, wipe off the table. I have to wipe off the table. She says, sweep up. I have to sweep up. I get the broom and start sweeping. So it doesn't matter. It's not conditional on what? On anything. It's also not conditional on what? The parents being good parents. So what some people do is they'll say, well, I don't respect my father because he does this. He smokes. He doesn't pray. My father isn't a Muslim. They'll say things like this to justify their uquq, which we're going to talk about, their disobedience and dishonoring of the parents. But if we notice, Islam has not made anyone condition. In fact, Allah ordered the Muslims who have parents who not only they commit shirk, they do the greatest sin, they commit a shirk, but they encourage them to do it as well. They basically strive in earnest to make them mushrikun. Allah even tells those Muslims to what? To honor their parents. Not to obey them in that, but to still honor them. So in Surah Luqman, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَإِن جَاهَدَكَ عَلَىٰ أَن تُشْرِكَ بِي مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٌ فَلَا تُطِعْهُمَا وَصَاحِبُهُمَا فِي الدُّنْيَا مَعْرُوفًا. He says, but if they strive in earnest that you would associate partners with me of which you have no knowledge, then do not obey them. But behave with them in the world kindly. Treat them kindly, even though they're what? Mushrikun, who are what? Encouraging you to commit a shirk. So these are some of the points that we made, and this is critical because, like I said, you hear some of those justifications for mistreating parents and not respecting them. Oh, look, I'm a grown man. I have my family of my own. I have to listen to my mother. Or, you know, I don't listen to my father because he's what? He did this or he's like this. That doesn't fly. Okay? There's no condition for it. That's your father, that's your mother. You have to what? Honor and respect them. ثم بعد ذلك, we talked about the rights of parents, and we gave like a few examples that we said, if we understand these examples, which are the rights of parents, from that we can make an analogy to other what rights, which are not mentioned specifically here. So we said one of them is that we have to honor them through kindness in words and deeds. We have to honor them through kindness in our words and deeds, and with our material wealth and physical persons. So we use all of the means at our disposal to what? To honor them. The next one is we have to obey them. Okay? And do as they wish. When we address them, we should address them softly, gently, and respectfully. When we greet them, we should greet them with a smile and with a pleasant expression. And we should serve them and tend to their needs. Whatever is within our ability to do what? To make them more comfortable as they made us more comfortable. When we were younger and we were smaller, we should what? Do those things. And also we cannot allow ourselves to become annoyed, vexed, or agitated by their behavior which is contributable to their age or to their feebleness or to an illness that they may have. So what happens sometimes... Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ahlan wa sahlan. So what happens sometimes is that parents, when they get older, maybe they start to what? Lose their memory. Mind gets old and they start to what? Forget. So a child will get vexed because he has to keep what? Reminding the parent of something. I just told you that. Or maybe the parent's hearing starts to what? Starts to betray them. And so they don't hear well, so you have to keep repeating things. And so the child will get vexed by that. Or let's say the child takes the parent out for shopping, let's say. And the child is like moving from store to store swiftly, from aisle to aisle. Like, come on, can't you keep up, can't you keep up? And you see this a lot with people who go out with their elderly parents. And this is an act of disrespect. That we have to basically not allow ourselves to become annoyed or vexed or agitated by parents who what? Who are not able to what? To do the things that we would like them to do because of what? Their age, their illness, or their feebleness. طيب ثم بعد ذلك there were a few points that were mentioned in the book that we commented on. One of them was that the Prophet ﷺ, he emphasized the rights of mothers. Right? He emphasized the rights of mothers. In the famous hadith of Abu Hurairah, a man came and said, Ya Rasulullah, min ahaqqa an-nasi bi husni sahabati. He said, O Messenger of Allah, who has the most right to my good companionship? And the Prophet ﷺ said, Ummuk. He said, your mother. And so the man asked, he said, Thumma man. Okay, I got that. Then who? So the Prophet repeated, Ummuk. He said, your mother. And then the man said, okay, I got that. Then who? And the Prophet said, Thumma ummuk. He said, your mother again. So he mentioned the mother 3 times. And then he said, Thumma abuk. And he said, then your father. And so basically we wanted to comment, we made a few comments on that particular hadith for clarity. And one of them is that it's important to note that the Prophet did not do what? Exclude the father. He just didn't keep going on, repeating the mother 5 times, 10 times, until the man stopped asking. No, he did what? He indicated that the mother has what? The most right, and he did what? He emphasized it. As if to say what? The right of the mother is what? 3 times more than what? The father, but the father still has what? Still has rights. He's still entitled to rights. And this is important because many people misunderstand this hadith to mean honor your mother, but all bets are off with your father. That's not what the hadith means. What the hadith means is your mother has what? Many more rights than your father, but your father's still entitled to what? Rights and respect, etc. All right. And we talked about the reason why. We said, or the reasons why. One is because mothers, especially when children are young, they're much more attentive to the needs of the child than who? Than the father. Okay? Generally speaking, when a child is teething and gets up in the middle of the night with a fever and they're crying, and the 2 parents are laying in bed and they both hear the child, who gets up? The mother, generally speaking, right? And the one who nurses the child back to health if he has an illness is generally the mother. I mean, this is just the way it is. And those late night feedings, okay? And that doesn't mean that we don't get up and do those things, but generally speaking, the mother is doing those things. So she's the one who's more attentive to the child when the child is what? Younger, so the child should do what? In his older age. Should what? Repay that extra sacrifice, that added sacrifice, all right? Also, because the mother is a woman, and women are generally speaking weaker and more in need of someone to look after them than men, then it makes sense that what? That the child should give the mother special what? Attention and special care and concern. So that's why the Prophet ﷺ, he kept emphasizing what? The mother, for these 2 reasons. And it does not mean by any means does it mean that you can ignore, neglect, disregard, disrespect, or otherwise mistreat the father. That's not what the hadith means, but it just emphasizes what the right of the mother. ثم بعد ذلك, the manual, the compilers, they mentioned that a child has not fulfilled all of his responsibilities toward his parent unless the father is a slave and the son buys him and sets him free. And here what they're alluding to is the fact that no matter what we do as children, we can never repay our parents. We can never repay them for their sacrifice and their contributions to what? To who we are. And to our existence, etc. We can never repay them. So we should never have that mindset that I've done this thing, I've done X thing or Y thing, and because of that we're even. You follow me? You'll never be even. You'll never be able to repay them. And they mentioned the hadith, which that statement that they made is actually a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, in which he said, no son can repay the kindness shown by his father unless he finds him a slave, buys him, and then sets him free. So that's the hadith of the Prophet. We also have the Athar of Ibn Umar, in which he saw a man who was circling the Kaaba. He was going around the Kaaba during the Hajj season. He was circling the Kaaba during the Hajj season, and he was carrying his mother on his back. So basically, let's say his mother was feeble, she was old, she was unable to walk on her own. So he's going to basically make Hajj with her on his back. And so his eyes caught the eyes of Abdullah ibn Umar. And so he said to him, he said, Ya Aba Abdurrahman, Ya Aba Abdurrahman, أتراني جازيتها, he said, O Father Abdurrahman, which was the kunya of Ibn Umar, he said, do you think by doing this I have repaid her? Can I say that by doing this now I've basically paid her back for everything she did for me? And so Ibn Umar, he said, لا والله ولو بطلقة واحدة من طلقاتها. He said, no, absolutely not. He said, by Allah, you haven't even repaid her for one contraction from the contractions of childbirth. I mean, this is, you could never, basically saying you could never repay her. Then he said, لكنك أحسنت. He said, but you've done well. والله يثيبك على القليل كثيرا. And Allah is going to repay you, going to reward you for the small thing you did. He called it a small thing in comparison to what she did. Allah is going to repay, or going to reward you for the small thing you did with what? With a tremendous reward. You'll get a lot from Allah for doing the small thing you did. So basically the teaching, like I said, the emphasis here is that we can never repay them. ثم بعد ذلك وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله. After that, they mention, again, they mention a number of statements that emphasize the obedience of parents. And that could lead a person to believe that you have to obey your parents. What? Absolutely. Even if your parents command you to do something which is what? Wrong. You have to obey them in that case. So they wanted to emphasize that that's not the case. That yes, you have to obey your parents, and obeying your parents is a must, but not when they tell you to do something which is what? Prohibited. And so they mention that. They say that there can be no obedience to created beings in a matter of disobedience to the Creator. And then that's supported by the hadith. So we mentioned the hadith in which the Prophet said, السمع والطاعة للمرء المسلم فيما أحب وكره ما لم يؤمر بمعصية الله فلا سمع إذن عليه ولا طاعة. So he said, hearing and obeying is required of the Muslim in that which he likes and that which he dislikes, provided that he has not been commanded to commit a sin, in which case there is neither hearing nor obedience. So if our parents tell us to do something and that thing is not an act of disobedience, then we're supposed to what? Obey them. But is that something which is mutlaq? Is it something which is absolute? Is there like a babit? Is there something that we can say, a yardstick that we can use to measure and say, hey, this is a situation where if I don't obey my parents, I won't be blameworthy. So basically the scholars, what they've said is they said this. They said that, first of all, if your parents give you any command which has a religious basis, it's founded in the religion, and basically they are just commanding you with something which Allah and His Messenger have already commanded you, then you have no choice except to obey them. They said the next level is they give you a command which does not necessarily have anything to do with a religion or has a religious basis, but it has your best interest at heart. Okay, they're thinking about you and what's best for you, and they're telling you do this because what? It's best for you. Okay? So they say, for example, don't move into this neighborhood, move into this neighborhood. Okay? Because it's closer to your work, there's low crime, it's less expensive, whatever. It's in your best interest. Okay? Now you have the option to move into either neighborhood, right? But they tell you to do this, and it's in your best interest, you're supposed to what? Obey them in that case. The next level, they said, is suppose that they give you a command, which really it has their what? Their best interest at heart. Okay? So they're really thinking about themselves, but whatever they tell you to do will not harm you. It's not harmful to you. So in that case, they say you're also supposed to obey them. So let's take that same scenario. Suppose they were to say, move into this neighborhood because you'll be close to us. And we want you to be close to us. We want to be able to look in on you and you look in on us. So this command has their best interest at heart. And again, it's not harmful to you. This neighborhood, that neighborhood, it's, it's the same. So in that case, what? You obey them. Okay? Then they say the final one is suppose they command you with something which has their best interest at heart, but it will harm you. Okay? It's harmful to you. Alright? So they tell you, for example, to do something which they will benefit, but you will be harmed. The scholars say this is the one situation where you can disobey your parents and you won't be blamed. You won't be blamed. If they order you to do something which is in their best interest, not in your own, and it will, in fact, it's detrimental to you. If it's some detriment to you, then you're allowed to what? To disobey them. So with that said, that was basically a review of that first subsection. The subsection on kindness and obedience to parents. The compilers then they follow it with another subsection, which they entitled The Danger of Disobedience of Parents. And they do this, if you notice, kindness to parents, and then what? The danger of disobedience to parents. They do this in order to what? To round out and complete the discussion of the topic. Because it's as if they're saying, we've already spoken, or we've already given you the targhib, the encouragement. We've already encouraged you to what? To be kind, obedient to your parents. To have this what? To practice and observe this birrul walidain. In order to complete the topic, we have to give you the other half, which is what? A tarhib. Warning you against the opposite of a bir, which is what? Uquq al-walidain. And this carries the meaning of what? Disrespecting, disobeying, and disowning one's parents. So they say that we in order to, as they're saying, in order to complete the topic and to discuss the topic thoroughly, after encouraging you to obey your parents and be kind to them, we have to discourage you and warn you against what? The opposite. And let you know that what? This is not just something optional that, well, if I want to be kind to them and get the reward, that's great, but if I don't, it's not a big deal. No. We want to warn you and put you on notice that it is what? There is a danger, as they put it, a danger in disobeying your parents, disowning your parents, cutting your ties with your parents, etc. So first of all, listen, ya ikhwan wa akhawat, that Allah and His Messenger have strongly prohibited uquq al-walidain, disrespecting, disobeying, and disowning your parents. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, for example, إِمَّا يَبْلُغَنَّ عِنْدَكَ الْكِبْرَ أَحَدُهُمَا أَوْ كِلَاهُمَا فَلَا تَقُلْ لَهُمَا أُفٍّ وَلَا تَنْهَرْهُمَا وَقُلْ لَهُمَا قَوْلًا كَرِيمًا وَاخْفِضْ لَهُمَا جَنَاحَ الذُّلِّ مِنَ الرَّحْمَةِ. So Allah says about parents, He says, should one of them, or both of them, attain old age in your lifetime, then do not say to them, "Oof," the slightest word of disrespect. Oof. Do not say to them the slightest word of disrespect, nor shout at them. Rather address them in the most respectful manner, and lower unto them the wing of submission through mercy. Now I want you to pay attention. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this verse is very unequivocal in prohibiting disrespect and by default commanding that parents be honored and revered. Kayfa dhalik? How is that? How is it so unequivocal? It's unequivocal because Allah prohibits a child from saying oof in response to his parents' directives or commands. And since this is the lowest form of disrespect, every higher form is what? Is prohibited by what? By necessity, right? By extension, by default. Is that not so? So if Allah says, for example, that you can't take a step toward haram, then we know that what? Taking 10 steps is what? Is even more what? Prohibited. You guys see that? If he prohibits the least of something, then what? Anything more than that, anything higher than that, is even what? More prohibited. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibits the slightest form of disrespect, the lowest level of disrespect, we know that what? Every other form, every other higher form is what? Is prohibited even more so by default. So it's as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying emphatically, every form of disrespect, no matter how great or insignificant in your eyes, is prohibited. Don't say, oh well, yeah, it was disrespect, but, it was it was an insignificant level. No, you can't disrespect them in any way. Because He says, وَلَا تَقُلْ لَهُمَا أُفٍّ. طيب ثم بعد ذلك, the Prophet ﷺ, he comes and he does what? Echoes the sentiments of Allah. But then he adds another layer of prohibition. He says, this uquq, disrespecting, disowning your parents. He says this is not just prohibited. It's not just prohibited, but rather it is among the biggest of the major sins. It's not just prohibited. Don't take this lightly, because what? It is not only from the major sins, it is what? One of the what? Most major sins. It is one of the biggest of the major sins. So he says in the hadith, al-Bukhari, on the authority of Abu Bakr, he says, أَلَا أُنَبِّئُكُمْ بِأَكْبَرِ الْكَبَائِرِ. He says, shall I not inform you of the biggest of the major sins? And he said it 3 times. And so his companions responded, yes, O Messenger of Allah, please do inform us. Let us know what it is. He said, al-Ishraq billah, ascribing partners to Allah, wa uquq al-walidain, and to be disobedient or disrespectful to one's parents. In a similar hadith, another hadith like this, on the authority of Abdullah ibn Amr, collected by Bukhari, the Prophet said, al-kaba'ir, he said, the major sins include. Then he said, al-Ishraq billah, wa uquq al-walidain, wa qatl al-nafs, wa yamin al-ghamus. He said, the major sins include associating partners with Allah, shirk, disrespecting and disregarding one's parents, murder, and intentionally rendering a false oath. Now pay attention, in both of these 2 hadith, the Prophet coupled a shirk with what? With disobeying your parents. As if to say, there's no sin greater than a shirk, there's no sin greater than disobeying your parents, except what? A shirk. Each time he puts what? Shirk and uquq al-walidain what? Together. As if to say, there's no, just like there's no right greater than the right of the parents except the right of Allah, there's no sin greater than the sin of shirk, there's no sin greater than the sin of uquq except what? A shirk, violating Allah's right to, or His oneness. In another hadith, collected by Bukhari Muslim authority, Mughir ibn Shu'bah, the Prophet, he said, Inna Allah Ta'ala harrama alaykum uquq al-ummahat wa man'an wahat wa wa'd al-banat. He said, indeed Allah has forbidden you the following: disrespecting your mothers, withholding what you should give, while demanding what you are not entitled to, and burying your daughters alive. Then he said, وَكَرِهَ لَكُمْ قِيلَ وَقَالَ وَكَثْرَةَ السُّؤَالِ وَإِضَاءَةَ الْمَالِ. And he said, he went on to say, he also hates, he said, she said. Okay? Asking too many questions, the answers of which will be of no benefit to anyone, and to waste your wealth. So in this hadith, he mentioned among the forbidden things, the first one out of the gate, he's mentioned what? Disrespecting your mothers. Now what we'll do here now is we want to mention some examples of uquq al-walidain, some examples of disrespecting and disobeying the parents, because in order for us to really realize what translates into it, because some people will think they'll do something and they'll say, well, this is not really disrespect. Until they what? Somebody lets them know that, yeah, in reality, Islamically, it is. So we want to give some of those examples so we can understand for our own selves what constitutes disrespect. First of all, intentionally making one's parents cry or making them sad. Doing something intentionally which will make them cry or make them sad. Think about that, ya ikhwan. And think about how many times we'll do something intentionally because we're upset, because we didn't get our way, whatever, and it'll make what? One of our parents cry or sad. Some of us men who were young men at one time and were rebellious, we know those, those teenage years where we didn't come home, right? We had a curfew and didn't come home, didn't call, and you come home and your mother's just, because she's worried, that, something happened. People getting shot and getting killed in the neighborhood all the time, We've lived those experiences where we did something to make our parents cry or sad. So we need to be aware of that. That's a type of what? Uquq, type of disrespect. Another one is to rebuke, rebuff, or snub them, to chase them away or make them feel unwanted. Okay? This is also an act of what? Disrespect. Another one is to be annoyed, agitated, or vexed by their instructions or commands. So they tell you to do something, and then you show that what? You don't like it. You're annoyed by the fact that they ask you to do X, Y, or Z. And again, we said that it doesn't matter if you're the head of your own household and you're coming to visit your mom. And she says, could you take out the trash? Or could you put away those groceries? Or could you wipe off the table? It doesn't matter that you're 40 years old or 50 years old. That doesn't change the fact that if you go like this, I came to visit. I didn't come to be put to work. You do something like that, you're what? You're disrespecting your parents. You're disrespecting your mother, your father, etc. Another form of disrespect is to frown at them. And we talked about how part of honoring your parents is always greeting them with what? A pleasant expression. Smiling at them, having a pleasant expression, putting on a happy face, so to speak. If you do the opposite, if you frown at them, then what? You are guilty of what? Disrespect. Another one is to humiliate them or hold them in contempt. Sometimes parents are not the most educated. They're not the most cultured. They're not the most literate. They're not the most tech savvy. And a child will do what? Will make fun of them for that. Right? Oh, my dad didn't even finish high school. That's one. That's disrespect. You don't do that. You don't hold your parents in contempt. You don't look down on what? On your parents. So that's another form of disrespect. Another one is to order them around. To issue orders to them. You see, a lot of people do that. A lot of young people do that. Right? They'll tell, and this is a problem that we have in the Muslim community because our children are growing up here in an environment where this type of behavior is acceptable, is that they'll tell their parents something. They'll tell them. They don't ask them. They'll tell them. That's disrespect. Another one is to criticize, for example, the food prepared by one's mother. So mom prepares something, and the child says, this is nasty, this is awful, right? This smells bad, whatever. We don't do that. And the Prophet ﷺ, he was the type of person, he taught us something about food. And we're going to talk in detail once we finish the book. We're going to present Ibn al-Qayyim's discussion in Zad al-Ma'ad of the Prophet's character. And we're going to talk about some of these points, but I'll just mention it here in advance. The Prophet was the type of person who, if food was given to him, if he liked it, he ate it. If he didn't like it, he didn't criticize it. And لم يتفقد مفقودا. He wasn't the kind of person who what? He would ask for something which wasn't what? Present. Like he's given fish and he asked for what? Chicken. He wasn't that type of person. If fish was given to him, he ate what? He ate fish. So he was very keen not to what? Not to criticize. If I like it, I eat it. If I don't like it, I leave it. But I never say what? Anything negative. And I'm going to be honest with you. If it's a husband and wife and the husband were to say something negative about the food, it hurts. So think about if it's what? If it's your mother. Right? Think of how much more that would what? That would sting. All right, another one. Walaikum salam. All right. Another one is when we either refuse or we just what? We refrain from helping them with chores. There's things to be done around the house. We see these things need to be done, and we just what? We sit back and let the parents what? Do all the work. That's a type of disrespect, type of uquq, that children should do what? Should help their parents. Again, I said it doesn't matter if you're the head of your own household, you have your own house to clean, go visit mom, and there's some stuff to do. You help out. The next thing is turning away from them and refusing to listen to them. So sometimes they're talking and they're asking you something or telling you something, giving you advice, and we just do what? We turn away and we just give the hand. Right? That's again what? A form of disrespect. You listen to your parents and you give them the impression that what? Like you're hanging on their every word. Right? That's what respect dictates. You don't sit there and like, yeah, ma, yeah, whatever. We don't do that. That's disrespect. But another one is having no regard for their opinion, their advice, or their suggestions. So they give you advice, they offer their opinion, and you just what? Disregard it. Okay, we don't do that. That's again a form of disrespect. Another one is failing to seek their permission before entering their what? their private quarters, right? Their private quarters. And this is a big problem, like I said, and it's a problem that Muslim youth have because what? Because they've brought up here and they're affected by the culture. It's that you just don't go into a place where your parents do what? They undress. You don't go there and just what? Barge in. You don't do that. You just don't do that. It's disrespectful. You don't incite an argument or create a ruckus in their presence. Okay? Because this will do what? It will annoy them. And by annoying them, you're what? Disrespecting them. So, for example, sometimes what happens is that siblings will have a disagreement. And they'll have a heated... That disagreement will do what? It'll escalate to a heated argument. You don't do that in front of what? Your parents. Me and my sister don't get along, and she's always saying bad stuff about Islam, for example. Let's say, and this is not the case with me, I'm just giving you this example, hypothetically. So I go visit my mom, my sister's there, for example, and then she starts up. What am I going to do? I'm going to swallow it. Why? Because what? I can't disrespect my parents. I can't start have a heated argument with my sister in front of what? My parents. Now, when we step outside, it might be a different thing. But while I'm there, I'm going to be what? Respectful to what? My parents. Even if my sister isn't respectful. That's not a justification for me to be disrespectful. Another form of uquq would be to disparage or put them down in front of others or defame them. Okay? You disparage them or put them down in front of others or otherwise defame them. That's another way. Or to insult them or curse them. To insult them or curse them. And you find some children are bold and daring enough to actually do what? To issue insults to their parents. To call their parents names, sometimes vulgar names, sometimes use curse words to refer to their parents. And again, we Muslims, in our culture, that's unacceptable behavior. That's a form of disrespect. Another form of disrespect would be to bring something prohibited items into their homes, or to engage in forbidden practices in their presence. So basically, it would be disrespectful for a person who does what? Who smokes to go what? Into his parents' house and light up a cigarette. That would be what? Disrespectful. Okay? You do prohibited things, you don't do it what? In your parents' house. You don't bring it into what? Into your parents' home. Another way that people disrespect their parents, which is more indirect, is ruining their reputation, their good name. Right? So some children will behave in a way that brings shame to their parents. You're disrespecting them. You say, well, I didn't do anything to them. That's me. Right? I'm hurting myself. No, you're hurting them because why? You carry their what? Their name. Right? It's like one guy said, he said, my father sent me off to college and he said, boy, he said, I don't have anything in this world except my name. Don't mess it up. Don't mess it up. So that's basically the case, that we conduct ourselves in a certain way because we don't want to do what? Ruin our father's or our mother's good name. Another form of uquq would be burdening them with many requests and demands for things. Okay? So a child who's always asking what? For things, and as soon as they get one thing, they're asking for what? Another thing. As soon as they get that thing, and they're never satisfied, that's a form of what? Uquq. That's a form of disrespect, and it's something that a lot of our children are afflicted with. Our children are afflicted with this, and we need to teach them. We need to teach them. And I mention a lot of these for our own benefit. Some of them are applicable to us, even though most of us have families of our own. But I also mention this because we have to what? Teach our children. We have to make them aware that these things are what? Are uquq, that they're disrespecting, they're committing a great sin. As we said, the greatest sin after shirk is what? Is uquq. And so we have to teach our children that they shouldn't behave like this because they're guilty of what? Of this great sin. Another form of uquq is when a husband prefers his wife over his parents. Okay, again, which is something that is becoming part of the Muslim culture, not Islamic culture, but the culture of what? Muslims. That you'll find that a man will do what? Will prefer his wife and give his wife preferential treatment over what? His own mother or his parents. And may even mistreat them because of his wife telling him what? To do so. And this is not acceptable as a type of what? Uquq. Another one is abandoning them when they need you most or when they become elderly. Like what, ya ikhwan? Like what? Give me an example of that.
Nursing
Homes and assisted living, right? And yeah, Juan, again, this is where Muslims living in this environment get what? Affected and influenced. So it's not uncommon for a person here, when their parents become elderly, to put them in what they call an old folks home, and to send them a card on certain occasions, and to visit maybe once a year. And their situation is so pitiful. If you ever go into these places and you talk to the people who work there, they'll tell you that this person never gets visited, right? And this person gets visited once a year. And you have to think that it's like when the roles were reversed and you couldn't what? You couldn't bathe yourself, you couldn't walk, you couldn't talk, you couldn't feed yourself, you couldn't clothe yourself. And when you would go to the bathroom, you couldn't control those bodily functions, so somebody to clean you. A lot of people's parents get to that what? That state, and they do what? They wash their hands of them, right? And Islam says that you can't do that. That's a type of what? A type of disrespect on the part of children. We can't do that yet, Juan. We cannot do that. It's a burden, and sometimes it becomes almost like a full-time job for some children. But it's that sacrifice that we make in what? In repayment of the sacrifice that they made. The next one is disowning them or renouncing them. That's another type of uquq, like cutting ties with them. We have to be very careful of this and be... sometimes parents and children can have a falling out. That can happen. And the child might even feel justified in something, that stance that they're taking or whatever. We have to remember that at the end of the day, we don't know when we're going to take our last breath, and you don't want to die in a situation where what? You've severed the ties with what? Your parents. And you've committed the greatest sin after what? A shirk. But thumma transgressing against them physically, like a child who would do what? Strike their parents. And I'm asking you honestly, Juan, how many of you have gone like to a mall, gone to like an amusement park, or gone to like one of those public places where you're going to encounter a lot of different people, parents and children, and seen a child be told, for example, no by a mother or father, and then that child proceed to kick the parent? How many of you guys, give me a show of hands if you've seen something like that. Come on, look at this, man. I mean, look at that. It's a phenomenon here. It's a big problem here. You don't think that our children get what? Influenced by that? You don't think that happens out here in the parking lot, right out here in the masjid? You guys see what I'm saying? So we have to teach our children about acceptable behavior, and it's not just a thing where the parents teach them. Because sometimes what happens is that parents get tuned out. Children are not listening to you, and you're telling them that what? This is uquq. But this is something that what? The khatib, the imam has to do it. People in the community will respect it, and they give classes that they have to do it. And people who teach in the Islamic school, they have to do it so that our children understand. They get bombarded with the message that what? This is what? Disrespect. And you can't disrespect your parents. It's the worst thing you can do. They have to understand it, internalize that, and we have to see what? The results of that in their behavior. But a few others that we'll mention quickly: boycotting them, being stingy with one's wealth and not giving them from it, or basically giving them very little of it, stealing from them, and last but not least, wishing that they would pass away. So, for example, I've known people who have had parents who have a lot of health issues. And as I said, dealing with those health issues becomes a burden on that. And what can happen to that particular son or daughter is that they can just be so overwhelmed that they'll actually say, man, I just wish she would die, or I wish he would die. You can't ever allow yourself to feel that, let alone what? Speak those words, right? You can never do that. And that would be definitely what? A great form of what? Disrespect. I want to close with some of the causes, because obviously uquq is like a disease. Disrespecting the parents is like a disease. And you can't treat the symptoms. You have to treat what? The causes of the disease itself, right? If we just treat the symptoms, we're not going to resolve the actual problem. So what are the causes for it? Why do people commit it? Why do our children fall into it? Other children fall into it? So we know those causes. We can do what? Attack those causes, root out those causes, and thereby root out the actual problem of what? Uquq al-walidain. So the first cause for uquq al-walidain is al-jahl, ignorance. And that's the cause for a lot of sins. People sin and do the wrong thing because they don't know any better. As far as jahl, it could be from two angles. One, people are ignorant of what constitutes disrespect. They disrespect because they don't say, to them that's not what? That's not disrespectful. You follow me? So they do this because they're ignorant that, oh really? That's this? They're ignorant of that. So they have to be what? Taught. Hey, this is disrespectful. They don't know any better. The second thing, or the second way they could be ignorant of what? The consequences. Ignorant of the consequences of what? Of their actions. They don't realize that, they say, yeah, it's disrespectful, but what's the big deal? They don't realize this is what? The greatest sin? After what? Shirk. So because of that jahl, they do what? They commit it. So we have to what? Teach. We have to educate our own children and what? Children, the community. And that's where the role of aunts and uncles comes in, right? Let's say you had a father, let's say, and his son kicked him out here in the hallway. Okay? And the father just feels helpless to what? To address this. What would stop one of us from stepping in and saying, yeah, hey young man, you shouldn't do that. Can't do that. Respect your father. You follow what I'm saying? Give him some advice. And he might heed it because it comes from what? Someone else. So this is critical that we have to,
Sometimes you have to be like, hey, don't do that. Hands on. Because some people don't know anything other than,
and
you might not hit them, but it's like, look, don't do that.
don't do that. But you're stern, but the point is that you step in because sometimes what happens, that the children become tone deaf to the parents. They're not listening anymore. But they'll listen to someone else. So that, you kind of have to step in and share the responsibility. The Prophet said, "Man ra'a minkum munkaran falyughayyiru biyadihi, fa lam yastati' bilisanihi." Whoever amongst you sees an evil, then let him change it with what? His hands. If he can't do it with his hands, then what? His tongue. You shouldn't stand idly by, and a child is what? Disrespecting their parent. The parent doesn't assert themselves. Then there's no harm for it if we speak up. Okay? But the next thing, our next cause, is su'at tarbiyah. Poor upbringing. Right? The child just hasn't been raised to be respectful. And I'm going to tell you, Ikhwan, don't think that, well, they're just disrespecting me. I'll take it. I'll eat it. Don't think that. Because if you raise a child who doesn't respect you, and you're their mother or father, then when they get out of the house, they're not going to respect ahad. They're not going to respect what? Anyone. And that's going to be hard. That's going to give them what? A hard way to go. Because there's people out here in the world that you're not going to disrespect them. You're not going to do that. Right? So we have to teach our children to be one. Respectful. And we shouldn't take their disrespect as a light affair. But another thing that can cause children to commit al-uquq is a tanaqud, contradictory behavior. That basically we're telling them something, but we're doing what? Something else ourselves. Okay? Tell them to pray, but we don't pray. Okay? Tell them to fast, but we don't fast. Tell them to cover, but we don't cover. You guys see that? Tell them don't smoke, but we smoke. Contradictory behavior can cause them to what? To act out and to be what? Rebellious and disrespectful. Right? But another thing that can cause uquq is for our children to keep bad company. The people that they associate with, the people that influence, the people who are closest to them. Okay? People they go to school with, the people that they associate with on a regular basis, they can do what? Influence them. And if they're bad friends, they'll influence them to what? To be bad. I remember growing up, I had a friend, and he had like certain chores that he had to do when he got home from school before he'd come out and play. And And I would want to, like, you know, get my play on right after school with him. And he would say, no, I got to go and sweep the floor in the kitchen. I have to do this, I have to do this. And I would say, come on, man, if you don't do it, how will they know? How will they know? And I reflect on that. At that moment, I was being what? I was being a bad friend and giving bad advice. And if he had listened to me, what would he have been guilty of? Disrespecting his parents. They tell you to come home and sweep the floor. When you get off, sweep the floor. You follow what I mean? And you don't think our children get that? You don't think our children's friends tell them to do what? Don't listen to him, disrespect him, don't listen to your mother, you have to do that, you know. You follow? And so we have to be mindful of that, because why? These bad friends will corrupt your children. That's one thing. And also, they will weaken your effect on what? Your children. They'll undermine you, and they'll basically weaken your ability to what? To influence them, because their voice does what? It drowns yours out. So we have to be careful about letting them associate with people who what? Who are going to encourage them to be disrespectful and have this uquq. But another thing is that will cause, or can be a causer of uquq al-walidain, is if the parents mistreat and disrespect their what? Their parents. Okay? So if the parents disrespect their parents, their children will do what? Come and disrespect them. Why? Because your children will follow your bad example. Don't talk to me like that. Well, you talk to your father like that. You see that? They'll follow your bad example. And at the same time, as the method says, kamatadinu, to dan. What goes around? Huh? Comes around. Right? So you do it. Don't think it's going to stop there. It'll be done to you the same way. So that's another thing that causes uquq. So we have to be careful. We need to respect our parents and set a good example for our children. But another thing that can cause uquq is if the parents don't get along, whether their irreconcilable differences lead to divorce or they don't. If parents don't get along, they have a tendency to do what? To badmouth the other parent to the children. Whether they stay together or they separate. If that exists, that will cause what? Uquq al-walidain. It will cause the children, because you telling your children that their mother is like this and like this and like this and like this, if they buy into that, then they'll what? They'll act out on that. You know, they'll act out on that. I don't have to listen to her. She's like my dad says. She's like this, like this. Or the opposite. If the mother is telling them all kinds of bad things about them, about the father, then what? I don't have to listen to him, because what? He's like this and he's like this and so on and so forth. So parents have to have the fear of Allah, and they have to have that modesty that we spoke about earlier in the work, that I'm not going to take my feud with my husband or my wife and involve what? The children in it. Okay? I'm not going to do that. But that's still their dad, that's still their mom. And so basically, that's like hands off. I don't go there. If I have something to say to them, I can say it to them directly, but I'm not going to say it about them to the children. If you do that, it can cause what? The children to what? Disrespect that parent. The next thing that can cause uquq is being too hard or too soft. If you're too soft, you're emboldening them. They disrespect you and you take it lying down, they're going to do what? They're going to step on you like a mat, right? Like a doormat, right? You lay down, so let me step on you. Or being too what? Too hard. Exactly, that makes them what? Rebellious. That makes them want to do what? Act out. So you kind of have to what? Be moderate. You have to be in the middle. And so you know when sometimes they need what? They need you to be hard, and sometimes they need you to be soft, but you can't be what? All soft or all hard. And then finally, or not finally, there's two left. One of them is that when they are respectful, we need to commend them for that. Because sometimes what happens is when children do good things, and they're not told, hey, that was good. They're not shown appreciation. Sometimes it's not enough that Allah is watching and they're going to get Allah's reward. They want to hear the parents recognizing, acknowledging the fact that what? They've been good. And so we need to make it a point to do what? To tell them that, attaboy, that was good, you did good, commend them. And not be the ones who just, dispel it or chalk it up as, well, you're supposed to do that. So why should I give you any credit or encouragement? No, we should encourage them and commend them. And finally, another thing that contributes, and we kind of talked about this throughout the whole discussion, is the environment, the surroundings, the time and the space in which we live. And we talked about this, how here we are in this country where huquq al-walidain, disrespecting your parents, it's a phenomenon. It's an epidemic. It's a big problem. Okay? And they choose to ignore it. And because our children are growing up in the society, they get influenced. They get affected by that. And so we have to understand that this is a big problem. So what we have to do in Muslim communities is create an environment which is conducive to the type of children that we want to raise. Right? We have to create an environment which is conducive to that. That includes programs in the mosque. That includes Islamic school. That includes so many different things that kind of insulate our children and create a protective barrier between them and what? The influences of what? The society around them. When that's not there, you get children who are Muslim by name, but they behave like the disbelievers. Mm-hmm. If you talk to them, they talk like them. Look at them, they dress like them. If you interact with them, they act like them. You follow me? Mm-hmm. So the only thing Muslim about them, it seems, is what? The name. So that's why we have to create what? Like I said, that insulating environment that does what? It protects them from that and preserves that what? That Islamic culture, those Islamic morals and manners and ethics. Otherwise, what? Our children are just basically out, but they're out there vulnerable and they're going to be preyed on. Because this society will do what? It will chew you up and spit you out. So that's basically what we wanted to share on that subject here. If you guys have any questions, comments, or complaints, we'll take those. Hada wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak. Appreciate your point.
As you were saying, it's even worse now, I guess, because the people praise that. It's the opposite. Mm-hmm. So it's not like it's seen as a bad thing. Nowadays, if they see a kid doing that, mm-hmm. I mean, I'd say it's a lot of times, it'd be like these middle class, upscale white families sometimes who are they have more things or whatever, right. But they begin to praise my kid is a free thinker, he's independent, and everybody else from the outside, from other places see it, he's a messed up rat. Right. They praise that.
And they criticize anyone who chastises.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes
in any form.
Illegal.
Any form.
Yeah, and it becomes, and mm-hmm. now they're making laws to make it illegal.
Right.
So that way, even if you had a monster of a kid who messes you up and other people,
you couldn't do anything.
You couldn't do anything, and it's insulated even like legally. They're like, well, we can't really do anything to this.
And I'm going to ask you honestly, then once they create these monsters, what are they going to do once they go out and do something to damage other people's property? And
they're crazy. We the criminals. They're crazy.
I don't understand that. I don't get that, because ultimately, if that child continues to grow up in life as, like you said, a spoiled brat who has no respect for anyone's property, etc., what do you do to make that person conduct himself like with respect for other members of society? How do you do that? Once you've created that monster, what do you do?
Well, they just change it. They get psychiatrists to say, well, it's not because you didn't give them an environment, it's because there's something wrong in the human mind, or because of, so it just...
But then when it becomes everybody, or the majority of people, then it's hard to believe that has nothing to do with, like you said, upbringing.
They'll change it.
Upbringing.
Change the law.
Follow this shit.
The dua, bil walidain ihsan.
Hey.
You hear this dua? Bil walidain.
Well, there's an ayah there's an ayah
in the Quran.
A verse, yeah.
But it's actually like, oh Allah, what is it? Like, give them ihsan, my parents.
Well, actually, that ayah actually says, for example, the first part of it, wa'budullaha wa la tushriku bi shay'an. Worship Allah alone, don't associate any partners with Him. وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. And be kind and dutiful to your parents. The other one, it says, وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ. And your Lord has decreed that you worship none besides Him. وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. And that you're good to your parents. So those ayat are basically, they're not adiyah, they're not supplications you're making, but rather they're what? They're directives from Allah, commands from Allah to behave like this, to function like this.
So saying that, now what it's saying is, you know, to worship Allah like you see Him, even though you don't see Allah.
In the context of Allah, yeah. So in the context of parents,
right,
it means more like the way they translate is to be dutiful to them, to honor them, to respect them, to obey them. It has all those meanings. It's one of those words that you can only translate it according to context. Yeah, right. You can't. It's just one of those words that the context is going to dictate how you translate it. So in the case of parents, like I said, it has carries all those meanings.
So that's not a supplication at all.
No, not
that's that's Quran.
Mm-hmm.
So can they recite it, or how would that, if somebody want to wish good on their parents, or say that ayat, or what do you, or that's
Well, there's a few things. One thing that Allah does in the second ayah that we mentioned is He actually instructs children to make a specific dua for their parents. So, for example, He says, وَقُلْ رَبِّ ارْحَمْهُمَا كَمَا رَبَّيَانِي صَغِيرًا. And say, so He instructs them to make this dua, "O my Lord, have mercy upon them as they raised me when I was little." So this is a dua that we can make for our parents. You also have the ayah in Surah An-Nur, رَبِّ اغْفِرْ لِي وَلِوَالِدَيَّ. Oh Allah, forgive me. Oh my Lord, forgive me and my parents. So yeah, there are some adiyah in the Quran, some supplications in the Quran for what? For parents, but just not.
I got you.
Not in that, with that, and not as far as I know with the word ihsan. Okay. Yeah. I'll tell the Sheikh.
So if a parent is doing something religiously wrong, and you advise them and they get upset and they don't want to talk about it, and they want to prevent it, how far can you go? When do you stop?
You give them the advice, and when they appear agitated and annoyed, you leave them, and the proof for that is the example of Ibrahim. When he started talking to his father, and he said, yeah, so he started out giving him advice about, because his father was an idol maker. Yeah. So he said, "Ya abati, lima ta'budu ma la yasma'u wa la yubsiru wa la yughni anka shay'a. Ya abati, inni qad ja'ani min al-ilmi ma lam ya'tika fattabi'ni." So he kept giving him advice, and then when his father said, he said, "Araghibun anta an alihati ya Ibrahim, la in lam tantahi la arjumannak wahjurni maliya." So what did he do? He stopped, and he started praying for him. Right? He started praying for him, or he said, "I'm gonna pray for you," and "Salamun alayka, sa'astaghfir laka rabbi." Right? So he stopped. So I think similarly is that if they're doing something violating their religion, you definitely advise them. Okay, and you have the precedent in Ibrahim. You definitely advise them, and you do so softly and respectfully. And then if they become agitated and annoyed, they maybe issue threats or whatever, then you do what? You relent. But you relent in a way which is still what? Very respectful, and showing what? Your love and respect for them, that Salamun alayka sa'astaghfir laka rabbi. Right? So, peace, I don't want any trouble, I don't want to agitate you, and I'll seek Allah's forgiveness for you. Right? And for me, if I've made you angry or offended. You follow me? So that's what you do. But yeah, you definitely can advise them. You can do that. You have the authority to do that. But you do so respectfully, and if they, like I said, become agitated, that's how we respond. Yeah. Barakallahu feek. Fi shay ya akhwan, anything else? Going once, going twice, gone. Sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala Muhammad wa ala alihi.